Sunburnt Audio.
Hi, I'm Craig. I don't really consider myself an audiophile. I'm just a guy who likes to listen to his music through his hi-fi rather than listen to his hi-fi through his music. Quite some time ago, I did a video on the Gato Audio PRE-3 Preamplifier, and a few of you asked for a follow-up on the PRE-1, which at the time was waiting in a box for me. I apologize for the amount of time it's taken for this video to come out, but truly it has not been anything of my doing. 10 days after receiving the PRE-1, I had to pack it up and ship it back to Gato for some updates and for some repairs. I'll cover that at the end of this video so that you understand what the situation is. Let me just apologize for all the bird sounds. I have the door wide open for a cool breeze and better light in here, so you can consider the chirping as part of the ambience of the whole video. For those of you who want to know who Gato Audio are, what the ordering process is like, and where to obtain their gear, I'm going to refer you to the PRE-3 video. I covered it quite extensively there, and I see no real reason to rehash it here for the sake of brevity. Secondly, I won't be covering Roon. Roon Access is fully supported, and I won't be covering other streaming services. I use Deezer, not Spotify, not Tidal, simply because that functionality hasn't changed really. What I will cover will be some updates to the M-Connect app, because there's some new functionality that is in the PRE-1 that was not available in the PRE-3. Be warned, I'm going to use the PRE-3 as the reference in this particular video for two reasons really. The first one is that I've had the PRE for close on 2 years, so I've got a very good idea of its sound, I've got a very good idea of its functionality. Secondly, I think a lot of you who have asked me for this video are interested to know the comparison between these two preamplifiers to help you make your choice. The thing to understand about the PRE-1 is that it is not just a PRE with extra functionality and features. It's a complete ground-up redesign. It is a dual mono design with separate left and right channels. There are 3 power supplies. There's a power supply for the left channel, a power supply for the right channel, and a separate power supply for the digital and the control logic. It is fully balanced from input through to output, and there is also included a headphone amplifier for those of you who are headphone fans. So what you end up with is a base analog model with analog inputs and outputs, and if you then want to add to that, there are 3 separate modules that you can add in addition. So the first one is a Phono Stage. There is also a digital to analog converter and a newly designed networking module called the NPM2. So what about pricing? So at the time of making this video, the base price for the standard configuration is $5,000, give or take a few dollars. In addition to that, if you want to add the Phono Stage, you would pay another $1,100, so another $1,100. The DAC is $1,650, and the NPM2 module is $1,000. So if you order a digitally focused setup like I've ordered, is going to cost you around about $7,650 at the moment. So I thought I'd give you a rundown of what my complete system looks like so that you understand where and how the PRE-1 fits. So the start of my input chain is a Cambridge Audio CD transport that is connected via optical to the PRE-1 to take advantage of the DAC that's in the PRE-1. I also have Roon running on a Mac Mini, and that is fed via an Ethernet cable into the preamp. I use my phone streaming Deezer or sometimes YouTube or sometimes just online radio like Mystery Train Radio mainly for casual listening. I also use the M-Connect app, which is the one that you use with the Gato preamp. Once again, that kind of drives your Deezer app, but in a different chain. And I've covered that chain, the differences between the two chains, in the PRE-1 video, so have a look at that one. The preamp, in turn, fires a pair of PWR-222 monoblocks from Gato, and they fire a pair of Martin Logan Theos electrostatic speakers. I don't have vinyl. I'm going to be a heretic here and say that I really don't understand the research in vinyl. I'm old enough to remember just how inconvenient and crappy vinyl was, and what a revelation the first CD was when I heard it, and I've never looked back since. So, having just alienated half of my audience, let's move on to the features of the PRE-1. So the PRE has the same gorgeous curved design as all of the other Gato products as well. It has the aluminium chassis and the 3 different colored upper decks that you can get: walnut, black and white. And a reminder that Gato will also do a custom color for you. One of the things I noticed when I pulled this out of the box was the difference in heft. This is a much heavier unit than the PRD. It comes in at 10 kilos versus 7 kilos. In American speak, I think that's 22 libs versus around about 15 libs. Something different to the PRD is this new heat dissipation vent on the upper deck. Obviously, with all of the new power supplies in there, you need heat to be released from the chassis of the unit. My personal concern, and this is basically because I live in a very dusty environment, is that this seems to also be a portal for the ingress of dust. So only time will tell whether I need to somehow open the chassis and suck lots of dust out of the inside. So don't mind the flashing of the front display. That's not actually happening in real time. That is the interplay between the shutter speed of my camera and the display itself. So the front face is a lot more crowded than the PRD. We have 2 lovely hefty buttons. We have the input button and we have the volume button. The display shows you your current input, but when you change your volume, it flashes briefly to whatever volume you are setting, and then we'll go back to the input. There are a number of new buttons. We have a mute button on the front, we have standby, and we have a menu button. And what I like is that the display dim has been moved from the back of the chassis that it is on the PRD to the front face, where it's a lot more accessible. The display itself has a volume readout in decibels. It shows your current selection and also your volume as you're changing it, and it will also show metadata of whatever current track you're playing when you are streaming. When you work the menu, and there's some menu options that you can change, it will also be displayed at the front here. So while this is not as big and clear from across the room as the PRD was, it's really, really nicely put together, and really is quite clear and easy to work. A few interesting features. First of all, you can rename the inputs. So, for example, one of mine will be renamed Rune, and the other one will be renamed to CD Transport, and I'll show you that a bit later on. Secondly, when you mute, the mute is displayed in a contrasting red color, and likewise, if you select the headphone, it also is displayed in a contrasting red color, so fairly clearly to see from the distance. And then finally, when the unit goes into standby mode, it will display a small red Gato emblem at the top of the display. So let's have a look at the rear panel. As I said earlier, I ordered the optional DAC and the network module. Now, the digital analog converter is a Sabre ESS 9038 Pro chip, which is quite popular in high-end kit. It has its own power supply for signal isolation. It supports MQA and the various DSD flavors of 64, 128 and 256 sampling rates. It also supports PCM. You can, through the menu, select different filters for either the PCM, which is an oversampling filter, or for the DSD, which is an IIR filter. Now, where's my trusty chopstick pointer? Okay, here we go. So the DAC comes with a USB, 2 Toslink ports, as well as 2 coax ports. So in terms of digital connection, it's got a lot more than the PRD. What I could not find anywhere on Gato's website was whether the USB needs drivers for Windows operating system. I would assume that it probably does, but neither the manual nor the website gives any information from this. So I run Apple, so I couldn't even test that to see what the situation is. So what about the networking module? So once again, this is a brand new design. It's an upgrade from that is on the PRD. A quick reminder that if you order the NPM, you have to also order the DAC as well. The NPM is dependent on the DAC. Some of the interesting updates from what was available on the PRD is that the new network module supports Tidal Connect, Cobuzz, Deezer, DNLA, UPnP, and now Spotify Connect. If you've seen my previous video, you would know that there was no Spotify Connect supported directly by the prior networking module. Obviously, Arooj is also supported, which is one of my primary requirements. In terms of input, for Wi-Fi antenna, you've got a small antenna that plugs into one of the USB ports. You also have Ethernet, which is what I will most likely be using because it works better for me. And then also a Bluetooth antenna that simply just screws in to the back here and works quite perfectly. Now, there is no available documentation that I could find either on the website or within the PRE manual that is related specifically to the NPM2. There is documentation for the older networking model, the NPM. What this effectively means to me is that there is no clear indication or understanding which Bluetooth codecs are supported by the NPM2. So by now some of you are probably asking me, what about the Phono Stage? Well, if you have a look at the back of the plate, you will see that there's actually no room or no cutouts for connections for a Phono Stage. So as I understand it from Gato, you can either order the DAC and the Phono Stage or the DAC and the network module, but you can't order all three at once. They don't have enough expansion slots in the case to cater for all three. So the Phono Stage supports both moving magnet and moving cartridge. The moving cartridge input stage is a current mode design with a low input impedance. Gato claims this lowers both noise and distortion. By contrast, the moving magnet input stage is voltage amplified, and this apparently caters for high output impedance of many moving magnet cartridges. From the menu, you can determine which cartridge you're using, the appropriate capacitance for that cartridge, and also enable or disable a subsonic filter. So let's have a chat around the remote. Let me get my trusty chopstick pointer at hand. So firstly, the form factor of the remote has remained exactly the same from the PRE-3S. It's very comfortable in the hand, nice and small. It has a lot more buttons, so it's a bit more crowded, but that's to be expected because there's a lot more connections. My only two minor gripes around ergonomics is firstly, the original toggle on-off button has been replaced by two, and I find myself pressing the on button a few times to try and switch it off before I remember I have to press the off button. A minor gripe, but I don't see why that needed to be done. I think the on-off toggle was fine. Secondly, is the volume control has the volume down and the volume up buttons separated by the menu. I think it would have been better to have had the plus and minus together, because I find myself pressing the menu button every now and then when I'm trying to adjust the volume in the opposite direction of where it is. But other than that, a lovely design. Let's have a look at the control via the apps. I'm not going to cover Rune. I did that in the PRE-3S video. It works brilliantly. I run mine over Ethernet. I also am not going to cover Deezer. I usually use that via Bluetooth. What I'm going to do is just cover changes to the M-Control app. So once you've run your app, you pick your PRE-1, and then the thing to notice here is that previously the services supported were Deezer, Tidal and Qobuz. Spotify Connect is now included in the app. Obviously you need a subscription for it. In addition, there's an internet radio service called VTuner, which gives you access to a large number of worldwide online radios. I've saved a few to favorites, and once it's up and running there, all you do is you just press play and away you go. And you'll hear it coming up in the background. I obviously can't play it too long for all the copyright YouTube reasons, but there we go. And that's pretty much it. The menu system allows you to set different options, and this is easy to navigate via the remote and is well documented in the manual. For example, you can change input names for your input connections. I recommend that if it's a shorter name that you want to change it to, start at the back of the name and work your way forward, as you can see in the video. You can also set the individual gain for each of the inputs. This is to align their volumes, and this is from -10 decibels up to +10 decibels in half decibel increments. There are a lot of inputs on this preamplifier, and scrolling through them all to get to the one you want can be a bit of a drag. So what you can do is disable the individual inputs so that they do not appear in your scrolling list. For example, mine is the CD transport, which is a renamed optical connection, Rune, and Bluetooth, because those are the only three I use at the moment. Getting them re-enabled again is fairly straightforward. If you've opted for the digital to analog converter, you can set the filters for both PCM and for DSD. For PCM, it's an oversampling filter, and you've got a large number of choices: brick wall, hybrid fast roll-off, apodizing. You've got both slow and fast minimum phase and slow and fast linear phase filters as well. The IIR filter for DSD gives you choices between 47.44 kilohertz, 50 kilohertz, 60 kilohertz, and 70 kilohertz. So far, I've not played around with these to see what the differences are, but I'll get to that in due course. So how does it sound? So remember, I'm going to use the PRE-3S as my reference here. I used my highly scientific test protocol of asking she who must be obeyed to come and have a listen, because she has no agenda. She'd hardly even made it into the room when she went, "Wow, that is so much better than the other one," which pretty much echoed what she was saying regarding the PRE-3S in comparison to the VLA. As for myself, I was absolutely amazed at the marked difference between the PRD3S and the PRE-1. And remember, this is without any running. This was straight out of the box. In particular was the sound stage. The sound stage is much wider, and I think people refer to it as air. There was a good separation of the instruments, a good separation of the musicians, and you could pinpoint pretty much where everybody and every instrument was situated. In particular, what struck me was the deepening of the sound stage beyond the back of my speakers. It was really like we're on stage. It was absolutely amazing. For vocals, my usual go-to track is Eva Cassidy's Autumn Leaves. But this time around, I chose Pakistani-American singer Arooj Aftab's song Baghon Main, which is from her album Vulture Prince. I bought this off of Bandcamp, so it's neither CD nor regular streaming. And it was played via Rune. During the song, her velvet voice, she's got this gorgeous velvet voice, was just suspended in midair in front of me. And you could pick out the shift of fingers on the various instruments in the song. It replicated a live recording as if somebody was in the room with me, like nothing I've heard so far. For acoustic instruments, I've chosen Nils Lofgren's Keith Don't Go from his album Live Acoustic. The guitar work in this song is just utterly exceptional. The notes were crisp and well articulated, and you can actually hear the buzz of the strings as they slap against the fretboard. Lofgren also uses the guitar case for percussion, and each tap was taut and it was solid. Again, a live concert in your living room, but this time an auditorium, there right in front of you in your living room. Ethereal vocals and acoustic instruments are one thing, but what about things that's a little bit more dynamic? So in this case, I've chosen Thomas Dolby's track Hyperactive, all the way from the 80s. It's not really my favorite Thomas Dolby track, but I find it a really, really good workout to test what your hi-fi can do. It opens up with gorgeous brass. The brass is just floating in the air in front of me, through to very tight, crisp and clear percussion, beautifully delineated voices, not drowned out by the drums at all. And there was no sibilance on the hi-hats and the cymbals, and they used quite a bit in the song. One of the things I particularly noticed was that the bass guitar was really taut and really precise. So all in all, I think it handled Hyperactive with absolute aplomb. So where do you go after having tested dynamics? Well, in my view, if you want to really understand how a system can resolve, you need to play some heavy metal. And I've chosen Guardians of Asgard by Amon Amarth from the album Twilight of the Thunder Gods. In my experience, a lesser system tends to just turn heavy metal into an assault of audio mush with no real clear resolution. For the Gato, it is a different kettle of fish altogether. The growling vocals, the screaming guitars, and the pounding drums were all clearly resolved, even though I had the volume turned up to neighbor scaring levels. And one of the interesting things to me is often the little details that you pick up that you might not have noticed before. And in this case, there was a clear cymbal being played in the background that I hadn't really heard before. And I do hope that my neighbors enjoyed listening to that as well. So at the start of the video, I alluded to the fact that the reason why it's taken so long to come out is that I did not have the PRE-1 for quite some time. What happened? Well, two things. Firstly, a software bug, and then a hardware failure. The software bug was related to the fact that the PRE-1 had a very nice feature where no matter what your current input selection is, if you play something from a device that's connected via Bluetooth, it will just automatically switch over to Bluetooth. Quite convenient, actually. The problem was that this interfered with playing things via Roon or via the M-Connect app, which both run over your Wi-Fi or your internet connection. So every time you try to play a song on Roon or on M-Connect, it would automatically try and switch to Bluetooth, and then Roon or M-Connect just wouldn't play. The workaround was fairly straightforward. Just connect the device from Bluetooth, but nevertheless, you know, this is a fairly standard usage pattern, so I was quite surprised that that bug wasn't caught during testing. The second issue is a little bit more concerning, and that is that the bottom part of the display, which shows the input selection and the current volume levels, and also the metadata and the menu, just completely stopped working. I contacted Gato, and to their credit, Creston immediately arranged to have it picked up and shipped back to Copenhagen. But I was without a unit, and while I thought it may take a week or two, it took around about 2 months before I managed to get the unit back. So this is a new product, I get that. And the high-end hi-fi community is not immune to issues. I've had problems previously with the LIN component, which I had to replace some of the circuitry, and likewise my DVLA at one stage required a trip back to the factory for an integrated circuit replacement. But to have 2 issues happen within the first 7 days, and one of them being a software problem that to my mind should have been caught during testing because it was standard usage, was quite surprising. Okay, so let's have a quick summary. Just a reminder, I'm not affiliated with Gato. I've bought the stuff with my own money, and the review I'm giving you is exactly what I've experienced. So I guess let's start with the bad and then go to the good. On the downside for me was obviously the long delay, and then having to return the unit again after a software bug, which to my mind should have been caught in standard testing. I felt like I was the beta tester. I know the Windows strategy, let the customer do the testing. Maybe I'm being unfair. The hardware failure, you know, the display that went blank, these things happen, I get it, but I wasn't expecting it to happen within 10 days of having received my unit. To their credit, they've shipped it back, they've repaired it, they've updated the software, and things seem to be working fine now. I've got no further complaints there. On the positive side, sonically, it was beyond anything I was expecting. Really, really impressed. Remember, I had the PRE-3S for 2 years, so that's my benchmark. And I'm not saying that the PRE-3S is bad and the PRE-1 is good. What I'm saying is that the PRE-3S is good, maybe excellent. The Pre-1 is just on another level altogether. I'm really, really happy that I opted for the extra cash. It is a premium. It's double the price of the PRE-3S for my configuration. And all in all, I don't want to leave the sofa once I've switched it on. I tend to sit here for hours re-listening to the music I've listened to 100 times and to new music, and I'm constantly surprised and delighted. Thank you very much for watching, all 2 of you. See you around.